Okay, what? All right, sweet. Here we go. Hey, folks, and welcome. I'm really glad to have everybody here. Whether you're joining for the first time or you've been part of the community for a while, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you for being here. And I believe in creating spaces where dialogue thrives. Oh, thanks. Thanks, David Powell, man. Appreciate you. I got a script this time too. I feel like last week I felt like kind of a space cadet, man. I was going on these tangents and all over the place, and this will help a lot with my ADD. I usually do one, but I just wanted to kind of shoot from the hip last week with the integral politics and all that, what we were talking about. And I don't know. You guys tell me if you saw it, what you thought, if you prefer that or this better. But anyways, yeah. I believe in creating spaces where dialogue thrives, where curiosity is celebrated, and where we can come together as a community to explore new ideas and work towards a more compassionate and connected world. So the idea behind this project and community is based in Socratic dialogue, rethinking the way that we approach conversations, politics, culture, society, and aiming to mitigate conflict and division that really keeps us from unifying in a meaningful way and figuring out solutions to these problems that we're all faced with these days. So another big thing for us is the principles of pacifist resistance from the civil rights era and Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, and those things. That's something that I feel like is very lacking across all parts of the spectrum, but particularly in the left wing, which their ideals are to embrace those kind of things, you know? So I feel like the infighting and the lack of unity is really counterproductive to some of the leftist goals. Anyway, so let's all take a deep breath, settle in, and get ready for what I hope will be a thought-provoking and inspiring session tonight. Let's dive in with a curious mind and a spirit of collaboration. So thanks again for being here and welcome. I wanted to first, before we dive into the topic that everybody voted on in the community, wanted to talk about a little bit of what's going on in the community and some of the developments. So the Facebook group's really starting to get off the ground, gaining some momentum. It's really exciting to see the discussions and connections forming there. If you haven't joined the Facebook group yet, I'll post a link here in the chat in a minute, but I encourage you to check it out. It's becoming more than just me posting stuff there, which is what it's been for years. Some other people are starting to share their ideas and have conversations. It's really exciting to see. And it seems like it's working well. We haven't had a major conflict or any kind of problems like that yet. So it seems like everybody is kind of staying true to the principles and the founding, like guiding ideals of the group itself. So that's great. I'm optimistic we'll be able to work through those things when they inevitably come up. And yeah, it's just exciting to see. So like I said, if you're not part of it yet, join. And then we got the Discord coming soon. I'm still working on that. I'm aiming to have that up and launched by next week. Hopefully we can get some more people in the community that way and have some more like real-time interactive, deeper conversations and community organization across the whole project. So there'll be a section of the Discord that's dedicated specifically to Metapolitic. And when you join the server, you'll pick, what things you want to be involved in as far as the whole Ouroboros project goes. So I'm always open to collaborators and folks who are into that kind of stuff, especially if you know how to do Discord or whatever. We have outlets for everything, but I'm on track regardless to have it up myself and to be inviting folks by next stream next week. I also made the Metapolitic specific GPT on ChatGPT. So that's a tool that's designed to kind of help us think through political and philosophical concepts from a metapolitical lens, if you will, drawing on themes that we often discuss, like Socratic dialogue, community problem solving, systems thinking, integral politics, spiral dynamics. And it's been really useful as far as support for strategic thinking for me so far. So I'm excited to use it moving forward and see how the community can use it. I just wanted to give us a word of caution about that stuff, though, and also make a promise to everybody when it comes to the use of AI tools. So I really feel like these tools run the risk of significantly narrowing and dumbing down our conversations and our creativity, especially. So it's increasingly easy to spot for me when people are using these things. You know, if they say something like, I'm thrilled to tell you, or let's break this down. That's another huge one that I see all the time. Certain phrases that get used a lot that are kind of indicative of ChatGPT or AI tools being used. You know, it's kind of easy to just pick up on the vibe when things feel a little like impersonal or, you know, robotic. And some of them are getting better at that, at imitating human speech and conversation and everything. But I think that is not the right way to use them, especially in the spirit of this group and this project. You know, they can be helpful for organizing thoughts or, you know, sanity checking yourself or, you know, keeping yourself focused on a specific conversation. I like to think of it kind of like as a robot personal assistant, like a secretary or something that you can, you know, bounce ideas off of, but you're not really gonna, you know, use it as like the final the final thing, right? It's just kind of to help you out. So I've noticed that they're exceptionally bad at real thoughtful responses in conversations. So for like copy pasting from ChatGPT to respond to people in political debates online and stuff, it's I feel like it really just kind of contributes to the problem that we're trying to avoid, which is, you know, this exchange of monologues that goes nowhere and people aren't really listening to each other. And they can kind of further these problems and take away from the humanity of things. Likewise, they're really bad at creativity. So I write a lot of fiction and just different things, poetry and whatever. And I've messed with the Chat GPT a little bit along those lines, and everything that I've ever been able to get it to spit out has been, it's kind of like reading like a YA, like a young adult fiction or a generic fiction, and it's just not very, it's not very well done. You know, it might be good for getting ideas or like breaking out of a writer's block or something like that, but I feel like for generating the content itself, it's pretty bad at that. And it like I said, I feel like if you fall into that habit of using it for that, it's going to eventually possibly, you know, depending on how you're using it. Like I said, if you use it more the way I was recommending in the first place, maybe not. But it runs the risk of limiting your own ability to be creative and to, you know, think for yourself, pretty much. So the way that I recommend using it, like I said, was like having a conversation with somebody for brainstorming or thought development, but not for content creation or direct responses to people, or for anything that really matters. You know, if you're like generating like a business email or, you know, something like that doesn't really matter, whatever, like go ahead, save yourself some time. But if you're really trying to have a deliberate, real, meaningful conversation with somebody or, you know, create something of your own, I don't think there's a problem with using it as a tool, but to use it as like the main driver and creator is, I feel like a pretty bad direction to go. So, yeah, it's been really helpful with keeping me focused, but and my ADD and everything, like it's kind of been amazing for certain things. But you know, I've seen it Like you have to fact check it because I've seen it tell you just some straight up bullshit sometimes. Like if you prompt it in a certain way, like you say, "Well, isn't it true that this?" It'll probably tell you it's true if it can, or it'll at least try to make it agreeable to whatever you're going for. Not always, depending on what you ask, but still, I've seen it tell me like the solution to a math problem that has a 3-to-1 ratio was like a 3 million to 1 ratio and things like that. So, anyways, I hope we can find some good use for it in the community without turning ourselves into even more of mindless robot zombies than everything it has already done. The next thing, the nation states game. We had a guy in the community, a friend of mine, Dom, recommended that game to me a while back, so I set up a nation state there. And it's pretty a simple concept. You create a fictional nation in a fictional world, and they send you issues. Other people write these. We could write our own too as a community. Other people send you issues, and you decide on how you want to handle them. Your decision, in turn, affects the way that your society and government for the nation develops. So recently we went full democratic with it and started posting polls in the group, and we'll be doing that in the Discord also, and tallying up the votes and voting on the issues. And I thought it might be cool to actually to pull it up right now. I don't know if anybody's actually here watching to be able to vote on it. But that's kind of the direction I want to go with it for the stream in the future. That if people are watching, we can maybe pull some of the issues up because it sends them pretty often. I think it sends like several a day, and then they build up to like a certain extent. So it's kind of slow for the group because I don't want to post, multiple issues a day in there right now with the amount of traffic that we have and the amount of membership that we have, and just flood the group with that stuff. So yeah, I guess we don't have to do that if we're not. Let me see here. Let's see if we can share the stream and get some folks to come, because I don't know if anybody's even watching right now. Okay, let's see. What are we talking about here? Let's share it to the group too. Group. Okay, make sure we're muted. All right. Okay. So, no big deal. Anyways, that's the nation states thing. Hopefully we can get some folks, voting on that stuff, and we'll keep posting it in the Facebook group. But I thought it would be a fun way to play around with ideas about governance and autonomy and cooperative development in a creative way. So if you're interested in joining, it'd be good. The more people, the better. The more people from across the whole swath of the political spectrum, the better. That way we can build a more balanced society, and we're going to keep it democratic, The next thing, I also set up a server for Sons of the Forest. If we got any gamers I think it's only on PC, if I'm not mistaken, which is unfortunate. I got a lot of friends on PS5 who are waiting for it to come out on PS5, but it's a survival horror game with kind of some sandbox elements where you can build a base and defenses, and you got to go out and collect resources, and there's all kinds of cool stuff you can do with it. But yeah, it's a cool, like, fun, casual way to do some like team building and community interaction, and I felt like it could just add another layer to how we're building relationships and having fun while we're doing it, and maybe talk about some of the things that we talk about in the group. So if gaming's your thing, let me know, and I'll send you the info from the server. I'll put it in the Substack newsletter and the Metapolitic Facebook group here too after the stream. And yeah, it'd be cool to have some help building a mega base because I've pretty much done everything by myself in there so far. Um, a couple other things. Let's see. So we've been talking a little bit about like the future and collaboration opportunities, possibilities, political action stuff, like campaigning stuff, voting stuff. What can we do in our communities and those kind of things, which I think is great. I love it. And I put together kind of a project overview of the whole project, the Ouroboros project. So Metapolitic is kind of like a small section of it, of the grand vision here for starting a intentional alternative community. And Metapolitic is like the political kind of branch of that. So I put together a document. I posted a little bit about it on the group. I got a few responses from some people who were interested in hearing more. So I'll put that in the newsletter also. But if anybody's interested in that, like, how we can actually work together and put some of these ideas that we talk about into practice, and actually do something, then, let me know and we'll do stuff. All right. Man, it's so hot. So we took a poll in the Facebook group. People voted on what to talk about. And what we decided was to talk about the corporate capture of the American political system and the government. So that's what we're going to talk about. So this is an issue that goes back all the way to the beginning, right? Thomas Jefferson talked about it. James Madison talked a bit about it. So Thomas Jefferson believed that concentrated economic power, especially in the banks and corporations, was a huge threat to democracy. So he was afraid that if too much wealth was controlled by too few people, it would undermine everyone's political freedom and create a system where the wealthy had all the influence. And because of that, he opposed the central bank and opposed big corporations having too much influence over the government. And that led into his famous feud with Alexander Hamilton, which, if you know anything about U.S. history, that's a huge part of it. In the early days, like the post-revolution and the early formation of the government. And unfortunately, and some people might say fortunately, Alexander Hamilton seems to have won, more or less. Jefferson maintained a more kind of libertarian point of view, while Alexander Hamilton was arguing more from like a practical standpoint as far as getting the United States out of debt. But he did so, being a silver spoon baby himself, which all of those guys were. But he had no shame in it. And it's pretty obvious too that if you read some of their stuff and their arguments and the people that supported them and opposed them, it's pretty obvious that he knew what he was doing. Alexander Hamilton. He was setting up all of his rich buddies in the good old boys club to benefit, right? Which became a recurring theme in American politics. But anyways, their famous feud was over that. Right? There's even a clause in the Constitution that they argue about when they're interpreting whether or not laws are constitutional or not, going through Congress. And it's called the necessary and proper clause, and the Jeffersonian and the Hamiltonian interpretation. Whereas the Jeffersonian is more strict in limiting, the Hamiltonian is more open to basically letting the banks and the companies, have more say so over the government. So that's kind of the beginnings of all of that stuff, right? It's amazing that Thomas Jefferson had the foresight to predict that. He would probably be appalled if he were alive today and surprised by the grandeur of that and how right he really was. He probably didn't envision the scope of how it is now, but he knew the way it was going and he didn't like it. So this issue has roots all the way back to that. I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. So that's a quote from Thomas Jefferson. That gets thrown around in libertarian and conspiracy theory circles a lot about, they're trying to deflate the money supply and this and that. They're still talking about that, which is another, I think, one of our group topics we had to vote on. But whether or not that's totally accurate or not, and he said other things about this too. There's other quotes that he has, similar quotes, that he's basically saying the banks are going to screw everybody over. The big companies are going to screw everybody over because they're going to serve their own interests and not the interests of the people. And in that case, he was pretty spot on. Another one of the founders that I think had some great foresight and great points in the Federalist Papers and the early arguments was James Madison. He talked a lot about transparency and the danger of factions and special interest groups forming. So he was really concerned about that. Basically, organized groups of people lobbying for special interests that could dominate the government. He wrote a lot about that in the Federalist Papers. And while he warned that those factions could undermine the will of the people in general by pushing their own agendas instead of focusing on the common good, he was also an advocate for the Electoral College and tyranny of the majority and those kind of things because of that. So it's not necessarily that I agree with him explicitly. I just think he had some good points around transparency and the ability of big special interest groups to run away with the government, which is what happened, right? It just happened that these special interest groups are corporations. So his worry was that if one of these groups got too much influence, they start shaping policies to benefit them and leave everybody else out, and then it would kind of just snowball into this thing where everybody else can't really do anything because the policies have barred people from access to the government, basically. And we see that. We definitely see that, especially in recent history with Citizens United and some things like that. So, in short, Madison thought factions, especially large organized factions, could too easily hijack the system and steer it away from what's best for everyone. And that's something we've seen play out in modern politics with lobbying and corporate influence for sure. His solution to that he talked about a lot was extreme transparency, right? So everybody being informed. He was a big advocate for education and the public being not only well educated but well informed of what was happening in the government so they can make smart voting decisions. So here's a quote from him from Federalist 10. He says, the public good is disregarded in conflicts of rival parties, and measures are too often decided not according to the rules of justice and the rights of the minor party, but by the superior force of an interested and overbearing majority. In this quote, he's talking about factions, concentrated interest groups dominating the government and pushing their own agenda at the expense of the public good, instead of decisions being made by the benefit of everyone. So the most powerful groups get to impose their will and undermine democracy itself. Without going too far into a rabbit hole about this, I just want to say that this is something we should talk about more, the Electoral College and the defenses against the tyranny of the majority. The tyranny of the majority stuff was to prevent this kind of thing from happening as well. So the basic rundown of the tyranny of the majority argument is that if a king or a dictator, somebody's in charge of a country, and they're doing something wrong, we know who to blame. We can go after that person. But if in a democracy, if the majority is doing that, there's no way to stop them. So a majority, an open democracy, a true democracy can be really dangerous against the public itself. You know, the public can undermine itself if, like in what James Madison is saying, if a special interest group manages to sway enough of them to vote against their own interests. So I think we do see that a lot now with corporations, with, you know, like fake shitty studies, and just misinformation campaigns and things like that, distractions. You know, like there's food additives in our food supply that are banned in like 50 plus other countries. And it's just, you know, here the science is so muddied around it where it's like, oh, well, it's not really that bad. If you only have a little bit of it, it doesn't really do anything. And, you know, we just hear a lot of just like real weird, shitty arguments like that for like pro poison, pro whatever. You know, what if microplastics aren't that bad? What if processed foods are good for you? I saw something about that the other day, an article like that. It looked like it was AI generated too, for sure. Anyways, yeah, I think this is what he's talking about, but it's a lot more complex and nuanced maybe than it seems at face value here. So when you look back at what Jefferson and Madison were kind of warning about, it's like they were predicting this future that we're in right now. And they saw how concentrated power, especially corporate and financial power, could distort a democracy. They worried that if big interests got too much influence, that the political system wouldn't work how they intended it to, for regular people like us, and it would start serving only the elites and like big companies or big groups, you know, the people who were in charge of the big groups, whatever. And what are we seeing today? Corporate lobbying, big money. It's all there, just like everything they were afraid of, everything they tried to warn everybody about. Today's corporate lobbying is like, it's such a perfect example. Like companies, they funnel millions into campaigns and political decisions, like so much money. It's ridiculous. I don't have it in front of me right now, but it is ridiculous how much money gets spent on political campaigning, especially now after Citizens United and the super PACs. If you count all that, it's like, man, it becomes very easy to see that it's not about solving any of these problems. It's only about being in power. And I get the arguments that people make in defense of that. It's like that's the way the system works. But if that's the way the system works, fuck the system, dude. The system is fucked. Like, we need a new system. We need a different system. And that's what these guys were trying to prevent from happening. So, you know, what are we supposed to do now? So, another thing that this brought up for me was the Plato ship of state argument and his criticism of democracy and the Republic. This is something I've brought up a lot before. In Plato's Republic, it's a conversation between Socrates and a bunch of people. It starts out between him and a guy named Thrasymachus. They're arguing about the nature of justice and what justice truly is. Thrasymachus says that justice is just like a made up idea by the powerful to control people. You know, trying to convince them to be good and do good so that they can just exploit them, basically. And Socrates has questions, which he always does. Eventually, Thrasymachus gets pissed and leaves because he can't deal with Socrates asking him questions. He continues the conversation with the few other guys that are there, and they get into this whole trying to develop the perfect government system, right? So they come up with this ideal government, based on all their objections and thoughts and like what could go wrong, what if this happens? And through that they develop this whole kind of, it's like a technocracy. It's really bizarre, some of the stuff they're talking about, because they bring up things like nepotism. How do you deal with that? And their idea for that was to prevent the people who are running the government from knowing whose kids are who. And the way they were proposing to do that was through holding like these community orgies where, the families, like everybody would just, it was like free love hippie stuff, and nobody knew whose children were who, and they raised the kids communally. And just a whole bunch of other stuff, crazy stuff. But at some point they get into this conversation about forms of government and governing styles, and they criticize democracy for being one of the worst forms. They kind of go through these phases of like de-evolution, like regression of ideal forms of government, starting with aristocracy as the best, which devolves into timocracy, if I'm not wrong, which is like government by the military, basically, which devolves into oligarchy, which devolves into democracy, which then devolves into despotism or dictatorship by a tyrant. And anyways, he, whether you agree with that or not, it doesn't matter. That's just kind of a general rundown of what they said. There's a lot of good stuff in there why he thought that it worked that way, and it one thing leads to another, and like boom, now you have a democracy because all the spoiled kids like wanted everything without taking care of the money or whatever. But in that conversation he makes an analogy to democracy being like a ship at sea. And he said that they call it the ship of state analogy. So he says a democratic government is like a ship with an inexperienced crew. Nobody really knows how to govern, and everybody's fighting for control, but nobody knows how to steer the ship. So they'll get together and like overthrow each other, and they'll get their person in charge to drive, and then the ship goes this way, and then that screws a bunch of people over. They don't get enough food, or they don't get like the right working hours or whatever. So they get the next person, and then the ship goes this way, and the ship goes this way, and then this way, and this way. So there's no like clear direction that it ever goes. It's just kind of all over the place, and everybody's fighting for control and sabotaging each other. And the mob rule is basically, it's like to him it's like government by stupid people. And I get that, but I feel at the same time like, that is basically what the tyranny of the majority argument is about. It's basically saying that we are not capable of self-governing. We're not smart enough, and we're not self-aware enough. We're not aware of how humanity and the world and governance works enough to be able to do that. And that might be true, but that, to me, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're not capable of doing that. I think we could build a culture, a community environment, an education system that would empower us to be able to do that. And we could get to that point. But fast forward today, and we're still grappling with the same issues. Corporate money has taken over, steering the ship in a direction that benefits them. And it looks like that's the direction we're going to go. It doesn't look like we're getting to get the helm back anytime soon. So, anyways, let's keep moving like through history. So that was back in the like post-revolution. We can fast forward to post-Civil War industrial boom, after the post-slavery, like Jim Crow era. So during that time, the Industrial Revolution had, kicked in really hard. Um, like the machine stuff and all that was taking root. And you had these guys, these like robber baron industrialists, the Carnegies, the Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers, building these railroads and control, like taking over massive sectors of the economy. Like they would start an oil company, and then they would start a railroad to transport the oil, and then they would start a steel company to build the railroad, and then they would, have all these mines everywhere, and they would build these towns, and they would control the town store where all the people had, but like they were taking everything over. And it was at that time these guys gained so much economic leverage that they really started to flex their political power. And their influence didn't just stop at business and economics and money and finance. They funneled the money into lobbying and campaign spending and propaganda through the newspapers. And this is where we really started to see the corporate influence creep in and take over politics on a whole new level that was like not ever seen before in America. Um, During that time too is when, if I'm not mistaken, let me pull it up here just to make sure that when was Andrew Jackson president? All right, so Andrew Jackson was president from 1829 to 1837. Okay, so that was a little bit pre Civil War, but I think that kind of set the stage for this a little bit. Andrew Jackson implemented something called the spoils system, which was, it added to the already winner take all kind of concept of the U.S. elections. And like the how the electoral college works, where if they win the state, they win all the votes from the state. They call that winner take all system, but that's not what I mean by the spoils system that Andrew Jackson created. He started hooking up a bunch of his homies with like these government positions, cabinet positions, and that kind of stuff. So he's the one who really started that trend, right? So that was, I think, a part of this whole conversation because you see that a lot today too. Like for instance, with Trump appointing a former like coal industry lobbyist to be the head of the EPA, things like that. It's like, so yeah, Andrew Jackson's the one who really started that and kind of set the stage for some of this stuff. Just like these like slow incremental corruptions of the political system from what it was originally intended to be by the founding fathers. And I think that ties in a lot to our whole conversation about the philosophy stuff and modernism and these like post-enlightenment ideals. These founding fathers were riding high on this kind of enlightenment era optimism about the power of reason and individualism and all those things. So that didn't really turn out well either. Anyway, so let's fast forward to the Gilded Age. So this is when the monopolies really took over. This is what we were talking about with like Standard Oil and these big things. But Teddy Roosevelt came in and introduced all the antitrust stuff, the Sherman Antitrust Act. And it seemed like the government was finally putting its foot down and starting to regulate some of these big companies. But that wasn't enough to stop them for long. So in 1913, the Federal Reserve was created. And there was concern that even then, like similar to the whole Thomas Jefferson thing, that concentrating too much financial power in one place was a bad idea. But it set the stage for the very tight knit relationship between the big banks and the government. Because now we have a system where, and there's so much that goes into that, about like the currency and the different forms of currency that were being used in the US and like the need to control all that. It's a very, very similar situation to what happened between Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton. They wanted to allow the government to mitigate some of these business cycle boom and bust things and protect the economy and, you know, keep these big market crashes from happening. So, and yeah, anyways, you know that how that turned out shortly after, but so yeah, the relationship still raises red flags with a lot of people, especially in libertarian circles. But it set up this relationship where basically the United States government buys, sells treasury bonds to the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve releases money into the money supply. And then those bonds, those government bonds, are sold to investors. So the investors have to, the investors have to be paid back with interest. And then later, when we get to fiat money, that becomes a whole nother deal. But anyways, it kind of set the stage for that, marriage of the financial industry and the U.S. government. So the more centralized the financial power, the more influence these institutions could wield over government policy. Jump ahead to 2010 and Citizens United. That's a huge one. This is one of the biggest talking points today in campaign finance reform. So if you don't know what Citizens United is, the Supreme Court ruled against Hillary Clinton, who sued them for creating a documentary about her, claiming that it was a political campaign, because there were tight rules on how much money you could spend on political campaigns and how much donation money candidates could receive. Like if I wanted to donate to your political campaign, I can donate up to $5,000. But this kind of blew the lid off of that because the Supreme Court decided, and you can look at the actual decision, like what the justices wrote. And they decided, not all of them said the same thing, but the decision was that money is a form of speech, and that by using their money to make a documentary or do whatever political speech, they were exercising their right to free speech, and they could do that as long as they weren't directly affiliated with the political campaign of that candidate, right? That's why you see these ads that say like paid for by the friends of Donald Trump or whatever. Like they are not supposedly affiliated or communicate anyhow with Donald Trump's campaign. But that opened the door for massive, massive corporate spending. And there's some crazy statistic about whoever spends the most money on the campaign usually wins. So it makes candidates dependent on and beholden to people who have the most money. And who has the most money? Obviously, the billionaires and the big companies, the multinational mega corporations. So it essentially just put them in charge of the government. And how the Supreme Court decided this, like, who knows? It was a bunch of conservative Supreme Court justices who did it. But it's funny because the conservatives are supposed to be like the small government people, but they allowed for this big government takeover. And ever since then, the corporate government power has been steadily increasing. The surveillance state, the laws against domestic terrorism and stuff. Like you can't go onto like a factory farm and film there. You'll be like labeled a domestic terrorist, and you can be jailed like without trial because of the Patriot Act. So this kind of stuff has been increasing. Like the protections of corporations have been increasing, and the protections for the public have been decreasing because of this. So they call this dark money in politics now. Dark money cemented corporate influence in a way that Jefferson and Madison feared in the first place, but they probably never imagined the magnitude of. And that brings us to now. Since 2010, so much has happened. So much. So much has changed. The big things that have been happening post 2008, because remember we had the financial crash in 2008. It was a huge shift, and then during COVID, so many small businesses went out of business. There was a huge transfer of wealth into big businesses like Amazon and Uber and DoorDash and those things. And we're looking down into a new kind of form of economy that's more rent-based than it is traditional productivity, manufacturing based. That stuff still exists, but a lot of it is controlled by these kind of like feudal lords of these markets where these goods and services are distributed from, like Amazon or like the Apple Store, the Google Store. So they're charging people rent to use their marketplaces, and they're not really doing anything, right? So this is like a rent-based system, and that's why some people are starting to call it techno-feudalism. So I read the book recently, and it was really good. He talks a lot about these kind of things: corporate dominance, data surveillance and collection, the role of some of these AI tools, and all that stuff, social media, collecting data and using algorithms to influence our behaviors and learn about our behaviors and our psychology and everything, which marketing has been doing for years. People sometimes tend to act like this is a new thing, that, gathering data on human behavior and psychology is something they just recently started doing, but marketing has been doing this for a long time. This is just an extension of that. And these AI tools didn't necessarily have to be used in that way, right? It's only because of all the foundation of this like capitalist consumer market economy that we built. It's an extension of that. It's just a magnification of what we had been doing before. But it's led to this kind of tipping point, this turning point where even fewer, you've seen those charts where it's like 5 corporations control the entire food industry or whatever. So that kind of stuff has been happening. This concentration of power is a symptom of this system. And I think that's something that these founding fathers didn't see, which we talk about in the philosophy stuff, is also kind of an inevitability of modernism itself, and individualism, secularism, and just this whole worldview of this like scientific materialist reductionist stuff. Anyways, back to the feudalism, techno-feudalism stuff. Think about it. If your personal data, your shopping habits, your political leanings, everything is in their hands, and they know more about you than you know about yourself, and they're using that data to shape not only just markets, but to influence elections, in some cases partner with government agencies to conduct surveillance, that level of control is like global and unprecedented, really. So how do you escape that? It's not just money. It's everything. It's like slowly creeping in and invading every aspect of our lives. Like, they're tracking people's sleep habits, people's eating habits. Like, there's all these apps. There's like a ovulation period tracker stuff. There's all this stuff that, like, all this data is getting funneled and bought, and it all ends up centralized because they share that, so they buy it from each other. You sign like the end user license agreement and give up your rights to that stuff. So that's an ongoing thing in the tech industry, but we all know how that turns out, right? It turns out the same way that the internet did. The internet was pretty Wild West, open and democratic when it first started. And then with the net neutrality stuff and the SOPA and everything, it got shifted in favor of the corporations. So same thing, like the Napster stuff, the peer-to-peer sharing. Shut that down pretty quick. They shut that down, and then it came back in this other form where it was like subscription-based streaming services. And that ended up, it's really funny, that one to me, because if you were around back then, Metallica was making such a big deal. They were kind of at the forefront of this, like, fuck Napster, this whole controversy. Because they're like, we're losing money because people are downloading our music for free and they're not buying our CDs or whatever. First of all, most musicians make most of their money off of concert sales. And Metallica, like, what are you guys talking about? How much money did you make already? But maybe there's some validity to some of their argument, right? It's, if you're a struggling artist, it's going to screw you over. But the way that it came back in the form of these subscription services was, like, now they make like 0.0000002 cents per stream or something. You have to stream it like 1 million times to make $1 or whatever. I'm probably exaggerating, but you get the point. It's like they are not being paid. Like all it ended up doing was concentrating the benefit in the hands of a few companies. And that's just a recurring theme with all this stuff, right? So back in the day when we had the Carnegies, the Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, they had these industrial era, these like industrial revolution era, this kind of, they call it Fordism sometimes in philosophy, economics stuff. So there's like Fordist era. Think of like assembly line workers and those kind of things, right? Manual labor stuff and trade jobs, those kind of things, right? But now we're seeing the same thing happen in tech. It's been happening for a while. Like Microsoft has been sued so many times for antitrust stuff with these same antitrust laws that were formed back then. So pretty much their playbook is to, if somebody creates something that they like, they'll try to buy it from them first. And if they won't sell, then they'll create their own version of it. They'll just steal the code and create their own. And they'll get sued, but then they'll just fight it in court. And they've done this. This was even happening way back then in the auto industry and the like Tucker torpedo and all that stuff. But so this has been happening in tech, and companies like Facebook, Google, Amazon, they're dominating entire sectors of the market. Digital advertising, e-commerce. There's practically no regulation on this, and there's no even talk about introducing any regulation. People are too busy arguing over like LGBT boxer in the Olympics and the whatever, like bullshit. And I'm not saying we can't talk about those issues and that we shouldn't. And that I believe they are a distraction, but I also believe that we should be able to talk about those things and resolve those things between ourselves, but also not lose sight of what's really important and what's going on behind the scenes, that they're waving that stuff out there and putting on the news and putting in the media while they're running to the bank back and forth with depositing all that money I mean, they don't even have to go to the bank. It just goes straight into their bank while they're sitting around in their, yachts or whatever the fuck they're doing. Like strategizing how to take over the world even more. How to, their little pissing matches that they have with each other. But those antitrust laws are barely enforced now, and they've been eroded. These companies are growing like without any check, any inhibition whatsoever. Like, look at the gig economy. What happened? Like with Uber and DoorDash, how fast they blow up. The workers have basically no rights and no benefits, and they're at the mercy of these algorithmic programs that tell them what to do and how to work and where to go. And the platforms control everything. They control how much people get paid. They control when they say that you have freedom because you can set your own hours and you can work whenever. But while you're working, it tells you exactly when to work and where to go and what to do. And it also determines who gets the best gigs, who gets the best jobs, who gets the best payouts, based on like this kind of meritocracy, like how good of a worker are you system that's all determined by a robot. And I think there could be like some promise there, but it ends up in practice being very like dehumanizing, and just it doesn't necessarily work the way that it seems like it ought to work at face value. You know what I'm saying? It's like treating people like robots and machines, and it's kind of turning us more and more into robots at work. So we've seen strikes and labor movements, and people popping up to try to fight for better conditions. And there's been some success. There's been lawsuits. Certain places they made Uber start giving people health insurance and those kind of things. But it is a steep uphill battle against these giants. It's a David versus Goliath situation. And it's not even just about U.S. politics anymore. The United States, since post-World War II, they have pretty much taken over the world with economically. They had the opportunity and they took it. They became the world's like base currency, and they've held on to that position ever since. And they've done it through like these series of financial and tech innovations. So these tech companies are shaping global policies. They're using these big platforms to do the same thing that they've done to us, like where they're influencing narratives, same thing that the media has been doing. But they're now doing it through these algorithms, and they got more influence in some countries than others. But that's where we get a lot of these, conversations for like free speech and censorship. And it's not really about that. It's not about free speech. It's about them being able to get their foot in the door to be able to exert their influence in the way that they want. Because they'll still shut certain people down. Like X, Twitter is a perfect example of that. Elon Musk has been talking about free speech ever since he took that thing over, and he still is. But it's never about free speech. He's censoring words, and that's not even the biggest thing. Like, the government, well, other governments too, can submit requests to censor certain posts on these social media platforms. So what happens is the corporations, they usually review these things and make a decision on whether or not they're going to take that thing down. And Elon Musk has honored more of those requests than his predecessors did. Some of them have been in places that are run by super corrupt governments. And it's usually to silence political opponents who are campaigning against them. So he did this in, I'm not sure, some Middle Eastern country, where the previous owners of Twitter had not honored that same request from that same person. But Elon Musk did. Because he has to think of other things besides, like, is this the right thing to do for free speech or not? He has to think of, well, is he going to let me build a Tesla factory over there? What about the business benefits of all this stuff. And that's where a lot of that shit gets really messed up with these people, because they're thinking on those kind of terms and not on terms of what's best for humanity, what's best for society, and those kind of things. So clearly a real democracy would be preferable, you know? Like, we are gonna, no matter how stupid we are, we're gonna vote against those kind of things that are not in our own interest. But what they do is they just lie to us, and try to make us think that it's about free speech, or it's about, protecting our rights. So we really have to learn how to talk about these things and read and look into them and read between the lines where we have to, because they are 20 steps ahead of us, at least. So, we got corporations spending billions on lobbying, healthcare, energy, big pharma, you name it. They're controlling that whole conversation in those industries. And recent numbers show that corporate lobbying has never been bigger than it is now. These industries are steering legislation to serve their own interests while we take the back seat, like usual. And I mean, just look at it. Look at like the increase in like homelessness and the working poor, and drug use and depression and mental health issues. These things are like a direct effect of all this stuff, and they don't care. They don't care. It's like, it's your responsibility to figure that stuff out because we're all rugged individualists or whatever. And this whole project of that is not really working out. Another big thing that they've done is weaken the whole regulatory system. So agencies like the EPA, the SEC, the FCC, it's always done through this like government is corrupt. It's like it's funny that how like ironic and backwards. It's like Orwellian doublespeak. This shit. Freedom is slavery. Like the George Bush, what was that George Bush era No Child Left Behind policy that tied the funding of public schools to their standardized test scores. Like the lower the test scores, the less funding they got. That's No Child Left Behind. That's like that's like a fuck the poor children. That's like leave the poor children behind. That's exactly what that is. It's the opposite of what it says it is. And you see examples of that stuff everywhere. So the good news is like we're starting to see some antitrust momentum build up. A lot of people like us are waking up to these things, seeing how big these companies have gotten. We're speaking out against it. We're recognizing it. We're creating awareness around it. There's not really a lot of action. There's like some strikes, some protests, and those kind of things. But really, to take down these giants, what would have to happen would be we would have to see massive unity and collective action, direct action, the likes of which this country has never seen before. Like 100 times that of the civil rights era. Because think of it, the level of control and like pervasiveness that they have over everybody's lives, the level of information and their ability to infiltrate and disrupt any kind of organization is far beyond what it was then. They've only gotten much, much better at that. And you know what happened to those civil rights leaders? They got killed. So, it's funny that some of the stuff too that's like happening on the left. I wrote an essay about this recently about some of the infighting problems on the left and like ideology, cultural issues that the left has that prevent them from being able to organize. And I think a lot of this stuff is orchestrated by those groups, by these strategists and these think tanks, like putting these, it might be in part like an inevitability of postmodernism and like the deterritorialization of values and those kind of things, but I think that if it's not fully generated by them, they're definitely capitalizing on the opportunity to sow discord and chaos through that. So that's something that needs to be overcome, and that's what even we're talking about doing here with this project is creating a space for conversations to take place about what we can do and how we can do it and what's the right thing to do, and really committing to this idea that we have to figure it out together. Because we're kind of in this same boat. It doesn't matter if you're a right-wing libertarian or a left-wing libertarian. I mean, yeah, we have differences that might seem incompatible, but as people who believe in our ability to govern ourselves better than what they're doing, we have more in common than we do with them. Like the whole government has just crept into this more corporate, more authoritarian status. And it's detrimental to all of us. So it's more important that we figure out what we agree on and how we can do something to shift the power back towards the people than it is to focus on whether we disagree about like putting tampons in the men's restroom or whatever. Like I said, it's not that we can't talk about those things and that we shouldn't be able to figure out a way to talk about those things. And that's what I was saying. I think that we on the left have issues with being able to talk about those things without, flying off the handle and wanting to like burn people at the stake. But again, I think that's part of the plan, the part of the disruption plan. So we really have to move beyond that. So there's a lot of grassroots movements that pop up, doing labor strikes, environmental activists. Environmental is probably the biggest of all the categories. There are a lot of like campaign finance reform people and those kind of things, the like fight for 15 and everything. But the Green New Deal and the environmentalists probably have the strongest push, I think, of any of the grassroots movements. But even then, like, what really needs to happen is all these things need to unify together in one group. And the independent media. There's a lot of independent media like Substack, journalists. Even, I know I was talking shit about Elon and X, but I feel like to some extent, and this is to Elon's credit, part of what he's talking about, he's not exactly playing by the rules of what they want for like conformity to their agenda. And other independent journalists and independent platforms like Rumble, Substack, even some people doing podcasts and those kind of things, even though a lot of those podcasts are controlled or distributed through some of these non-independent platforms like Apple or Spotify or whatever. Independent media in general is where we can get real unfiltered conversations about what's going on and how to help mobilize people. And we want to be a part of that. We want to integrate into that. So, needless to say, it's grown over time. There's been some huge phases. It was something that was talked about in the early government. It really took off during the industrial era. Before that, some of the stage was set by Andrew Jackson and the spoils system and this like corruption of government. We didn't even really talk about Howard Hughes and that whole era of stuff. I mean, it kind of ties into the industrialist stuff and everything, the aviation industry and the way that his company was lobbying the government, and not just lobbying, but writing legislation, like hiring teams of lawyers and writing legislation and presenting it to Congress people as like, here, we already did all the legwork for you, and that's something that still happens to even greater extent today. So what are we entering the age of techno-feudalism? Is this still just an extension of capitalism and some kind of another mutation of like late stage capitalism or whatever? It doesn't really matter. It's clear that now more than ever, corporate power has become the biggest threat to not only like democracy. Like people always say that democracy is dying. Like what democracy? It's already like the amount of influence that we have on policy is zero, is negligible. There's like what democracy? You get to vote on some shit that doesn't make a difference and is not going to threaten these underlying power structures whatsoever. So it never was democracy in the first place. The whole tyranny of the majority thing and the electoral college, like we never had a democracy. We had a representative republic at best, and now that's even gone. It's like a complete oligarchy now. And now more than ever, we need to reclaim the system from these corporate interests and push for something that works for everybody. We're getting kicked to the wayside, and worse now more than ever. Ah, my nose is itching so bad. But I think there's still hope. Another thing that I haven't talked about yet that I usually like to talk about is that and aside from like the direct action and the trying to push for policy change and internal reform and those kind of things, like campaign finance reform, electoral reform, changing the voting system or ranked choice voting, and initiatives like that, which is something we definitely should do. The other thing that I believe could be impactful is to start forming community, intentional community, geographically, online, whatever. To start forming these kind of like third spaces and communities around putting into practice some of the things that we would like to see done through the government. Basically, trying to create the kind of society that we would like to live in, by modeling it first in our communities. And I think that could be a way to put pressure on the whole, monster. Just by not conforming. This is like a big thing that they were doing in the civil rights era, was just like, just don't do what they are trying to get you to do. Just don't participate. Like Bartleby, I would prefer not to. So we are seeing a lot more awakening, a lot more people getting engaged. Real change can be possible, but we got to keep pushing, and we got to really start banding together. So I encourage everybody to stay informed, support these kind of movements, keep seeking out this kind of independent media and education, broadening your horizons. And the more that we work together, the stronger that we can be in taking on corporate interests and creating a more balanced and sustainable system that really works for all of us. Oh, man, it is a crazy heat wave out here. So yeah, I don't know. You can see, man. You can see me sweating here. This is nuts. Nice. What's up, Chuck? All right, so I'm gonna wrap it up, man. I gotta go like dunk my head in a bucket of cold water or something. Um, but yeah, I'll chop this up. I'll make some shorts. I'll put it on the group, and then I'll follow up with you guys on some of this stuff that we've been talking about. Sending out the newsletter, engaging the community in the Facebook group, and sending out the Discord. And if anybody wants to jump on some games, man, let me know. I'll send out a streaming schedule so everybody will know when I'll be online. if you want to get online and join one of the servers. Another thing I was thinking about was starting up like a Minecraft server. I don't play Minecraft. I never really have. My daughter does a lot. Um, but it might be cool to, I know it has a lot of sandbox elements and you can create a whole kind of little community and do a bunch of stuff together there. So that might be something cool to look into also as the community grows a little bit. And if anybody has any ideas or knows of any other kind of games or little things like that that might be fun for us to do together, that would be awesome. Um, but yeah. What's up, Chuck? Why am I not seeing your comments? Hold on. Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah, dude, my brother plays Dungeons and Dragons every Thursday with some friends. He has like religiously for. Oh, hold on. Let me mute this. Yeah, he has religiously, man, for forever. What's up, Ivan? Yeah, you guys are popping on us right at the end here. No worries though. Yeah, dude. I was saying my brother plays Dungeons and Dragons and he loves that shit. It's great. Like that group of friends is so tight. And he told me about because I also have a story that I've been writing for a long time. It's like based on the simulation project or the simulation hypothesis. I mean, by Nick Bostrom. It's like, are we living in a simulation? It's kind of trendy now, I know, but um, anyways, I was talking about to him about like collaborating and doing some brainstorming stuff and whatever on that story because he's into voice acting and some other stuff. But long story short, he told me about this platform called Powered by the Apocalypse and suggested I look into that for kind of creating a tabletop game around that whole universe as a like story development device. So that's really interesting too, man. I think that might be something that might be fun to do as a group together, like a tabletop game. But yeah. Yeah. Yeah, sure. For sure, dude. That's another thing. I definitely have a tendency to do that and like spread myself a little too thin, trying to do everything at once. But that's another thing I'm excited about building a community and group around. Because I know there's people who know a lot more about those kind of things than me who are really into it. And yeah, I'm excited about collaborating and working together with folks. Space Force. That's funny, man. Yeah, it's kind of. I mean, the story that I'm writing is kind of. It crosses all like time periods and it's a lot of sci-fi, but there's some like ancient history stuff too. It ties a lot of different threads together. It's like philosophy stuff mainly. I'm thinking more like Dune than Star Wars though. What do you guys got going on tonight, man? Y'all got to work tomorrow? Yeah, I don't know about Terminator. I posted a meme about that earlier today, though. That was funny. Like T1000s and shit. But you ever heard of Roko's Basilisk? I don't know shit about shit, man. I'm just I'm just trying to figure it out, dude. Um, Roko's Basilisk is like it's kind of like a reverse Pascal's wager thought experiment. it's funny because the backstory behind it was somebody posted on this philosophy message board called fuck, what is it called, man? Whatever, it doesn't matter. Anyways, they took it down because they said it was an information hazard. Like people were complaining that they were like having nightmares. It was giving them anxiety and stuff thinking about it. So this guy, he basically said, imagine in the future there's a powerful AI that has taken over the world, and it's like Terminator Skynet. It's seeking out all individuals who opposed its creation and subjecting them to eternal torture. It's like keeping them alive just to basically send them to hell. And if you believe that this is possible, then you should right now start trying to bring that AI into existence. Because if you don't, and it comes into being, it's gonna do that to you. Yeah, exactly, man. Um, but when I read it, it actually, speaking of Dune, it reminded me a lot of the God Emperor of Dune, because that's kind of what he does to humanity. He subjects them to this like draconian dictatorship and shuts down space travel and all this stuff. But um, he does it kind of like as a, he calls it the golden path. It's like a way to ingrain into humanity's genetic memory. He's also doing this like eugenics shit too, which is pretty fucked up. But he's trying to basically breed humanity to the point where they are no longer willing to submit to authority by torturing them for like thousands of years. And yeah, so I wrote some stuff about this kind of Roko's Basilisk AI type entity, um, like running a similar project on humanity with a little different twist, with some of the philosophy stuff and the whole like Nietzschean God is dead and now we have to become God kind of idea. But I don't know, it's fun to play around with. Fun times, man. Ivan, what have you been up to, dude? Would you say you're living in like Arizona or something nowadays? Yeah, everybody jumped off Twitch. Only you guys left from the Facebooks. I don't know what was up with my Streamlabs. Usually it shows me what you guys are saying on Facebook also, but today it wasn't. It was just showing the Twitch stream. So sorry if I missed your comments from earlier. I saw your supportive comments about Thomas Jefferson and the money. Wisconsin, bro. I didn't know that's where you're from. That's where you did Golden Gloves and all that. Nice, Chuck. I've been to San Francisco once. Went up there for in the Navy for Fleet Week when I was in the Navy. It was wild. I had a good time up there. That was the first city that I ever went to that I was like, I don't know. I mean, I know like every city kind of is different. It has their own, like charm and appeal and stuff. But San Francisco's the first city I ever went to that I thought it was like kind of it was like alive almost in its own way. It's like its own entity. Yeah, dude, I'm sweating so bad that because I got this fan, bro, but it's like if I turn it on, it blows right in the microphone. It's terrible. Even with the noise gating, it's like unbearable for you guys to listen to. So, but it is making my allergies go wild. Yeah, you like living up there, man? I got a really good friend who lives like up in Sausalito. I come up there sometimes to visit or whatever. Dude, there's a heat wave right now. I mean, it's not like Texas hot, but it's been up in the 90s for sure. The thing is, though, and down here, man, a lot of people they just don't have AC because it's not really necessary, or it wasn't in the past. I have it, but I need to like get my Freon refilled or something. If I turn it on, it just blows hot air. I don't know what's going on with it. Yeah, yeah, that's nice, dude. I've been up there. Been up there a couple times. I need to go up there pretty soon, man. I could stop through San Fran on the way. Usually stop there to get something to eat or something, but yeah, it might be cool to drive, man. I never I got flown up there, but uh, it might be cool to do like a trans California road trip with my kids or something. I mean, they're adults now, but they might want to go for it. Yeah, you're right, man. My 17-year-old asked me if we go to the beach today, and I was doing some work, and I kind of felt bad because I wanted to go. It's real hot, but I think we're gonna go first thing in the morning when she wakes up. Nobody's gonna be there either. It's gonna be Monday. It's gonna be great, bro. I went to Wisconsin. There's some shipyard up there, and dude, I can't remember what that town was called. It was near Green Bay though. It was near Green Bay. We got some cheese. We got some cheese curds and all that. There's nothing out there, man. It was just farmland. I thought there was like some city to it, but no, not really. Don't ring a bell. Yeah, it doesn't ring a bell at all. Let me see. I'm gonna find it out, dude. Marinette, maybe? Marinette? I don't know. Might not be the one. It doesn't ring a bell either. Yeah, cats are pretty much born anarchists, huh? Poutine. I was in Toronto for a little while. I had me some poutine up there. Yeah. Cheese and gravy fries? I don't know if that's better than the carne asada fries, though, man. It's hard to beat this quasi Mexican grease pit food out here. Really good tacos, man. I never been out there, dude. I need to get up there to the west coast of Canada. I heard it's really nice. Toronto was shitty. The area I was in, it's like the New York City of America, or I mean of Canada. But I was in this neighborhood called Scarborough, which is like the biggest shithole area of the town. What, the fries? You gotta get them crispy fries, huh? Yeah, they're good, man. But I feel like that's you eat a one of those big size um like takeout containers they give you, the styrofoam ones. I feel like that's got to be like 4,000 calories at least, dude. You eat a whole thing of them. It's wild. Yeah, Scarborough's in the slums, dude. Almost got murdered there. Yeah, I got jumped by like multiple attackers there and beat up pretty bad. I don't recommend it. Yeah, yeah. Man, that cheese curd shit was really good though. They had it at the bars and stuff. They don't have it anywhere. I guess it maybe it doesn't like keep very well. It goes bad or whatever. No, dude, it's a long story, man. But it was like my girlfriend at the time was living there, and I was visiting her, and these dudes like didn't like me. It was just it was bullshit, but it was messed up because I don't know, like whatever, dude. I know you did boxing and all that, and like me and Ray Herrera were wrestlers, so like I did all that judo and grappling stuff, and when these guys started charging up on me, I took this guy down on the ground, and we started hitting him in the face, and the other guys just started kicking the shit out of me. After that, I was like, dude, I got to learn how to do some like Muay Thai or something, dude. Yeah. That's what I was thinking with the Kurds. They go bad, right? But yeah, I mean, it would have been nice if I had something, man, at the time. Yeah, it was crazy, man. It was. I mean, I'm glad I didn't get messed up worse than I did, but it was pretty bad, man. I didn't even look like a human being after that. My face was just like so swollen. It was crazy. But you know, wild and crazy younger days, dude. Yeah, thanks y'all for hanging out and showing up, man. Ivan, I don't know if you're in the group, dude, but you could join the group and talk with us more, dude. I'm gonna start up the Discord and I'll share all that stuff with you guys. And send out the newsletter with everything. Nah, dude, I don't remember that. I don't remember that at all. What year was that? Yeah, thanks, bro. I'll hit you up on. I'll send you a message, dude. We talk more. Oh, dude, maybe I just wasn't paying. That was like right. That was like right after I got there. I think I got there in October of that year. Yeah. Well, all right, brother. I'm gonna wrap. I'm gonna call it a night, dude. Try to get some other stuff done, and I'll see you guys next time, hopefully, dude. Appreciate you guys.